This conference will now be recorded.
Of Alpans, the Licensed Professional Planners Association of Nova Scotia. I just took over that duty from Alan Howell last week, so fairly new in my role, but excited about where Alpans is headed. So today we've got a presentation by Emma Wattie from the Atlantic Water Network. And I will say, just getting ready for this, if you haven't gone to the Atlantic Data Stream website yet, really great video there that explains what they're up to and what's going on with Atlantic Data Stream. Really new to me and interesting and exciting, but what I thought was interesting was their mission is to promote knowledge sharing across watersheds and advance collaborative decision-making so our waters remain healthy for generations to come. Obviously, that's a big initiative for generations to come, but certainly worthwhile. And I'd like to introduce Emma and try to hand over control to Emma to walk us through her slides, and hopefully we can learn a little something today. I just will add that I have another call right at the end of this, so I may have to jump off early. So Emma, if there is sort of questions and discussions, if we hit that hour mark, you may have to kind of take those directly because I'm gonna have to jump off, but over to Emma to get started. Thanks.
Great, thanks so much, Greg. Hi, everybody. I'm just going to turn my camera on. I always find that a bit more personal for meetings like this. So thanks so much for having me here today. I'd love to hear a bit more about you guys. So if you are able to introduce yourself in the chat box, I would love to see just to have an idea of what area you live in and where you work, whether or not you're familiar with Atlantic Data Stream yet or not. I'd love to see that. So yeah, Atlantic Water Network, I'm going to tell you a little bit about our organization, what we do, and then I'll jump into Atlantic Data Stream and kind of how we came about partnering on that program specifically. I will be doing a demo, kind of walking you through how to use Atlantic Data Stream. One of the things I love about the program is that the website itself, is that just like driving to a destination, there's often several different ways to get there. There's a couple different ways of getting access to that information on data stream. So it really kind of takes different approaches based on various users. So without further ado, I'll get started. Great, so we have some people from Halifax, somebody from Newfoundland. That's awesome. So who we are. Atlantic Water Network, we were formed in 2004. We're part of St. Mary's University, and we were created by a professor in the geography department. Some of you may know Kathy Conrad, and her research at that time was really working with community organizations, and mostly in Nova Scotia. And at that time, she really found that all these organizations were asking very similar questions, but there wasn't a central resource for all these groups who were asking similar questions. So Kathy created the network, or it became Atlantic Water Network back in 2004. We've run several multi-year projects. We have an equipment bank that I'll talk about in a bit. We ran a 5-year-long research project called Cure-H2O. And over time, we've evolved to become the centralized hub for community-based water monitoring in Atlantic Canada. So just kind of give an idea of what the context for CBWM is here. There are about 120 actively monitoring organizations across all 4 Atlantic provinces. And by that, I mean these are groups who are collecting water quality data. There are several other environmental organizations in all 4 provinces, but there's about 120 who are actively collecting water quality data. Several of these groups are 20 to 30 years old, and others are less than 5 years old. So we really work with a spectrum of brand new programs, people who are starting out from scratch. And then we also work with groups who are seasoned veterans who have been doing this for several years, and if not decades at this point. There's a really great case study about the economic benefit to community-based water monitoring. So this is a federal funding example looking at the ACAP groups that were created in the 90s. So ACAP is the Atlantic Coastal Action Program. And this was a federally funded program. And they looked at the cost, the funding that was invested into these groups throughout a 5-year period in the 90s, and found that these groups were able to stretch that dollar 12 times further than what the government had been able to do that monitoring themselves. So there was a 12 times turn on investment by supporting these community-based water monitoring organizations. So it was really that's been a value or kind of a figure often used to support the funding related to community water monitoring, but also the benefits to CBWM. I just want to touch upon too is that I know I said that was first a program that ran in the 90s. Atlantic Water Network's part of a case study kind of initiative to look at updating that figure to getting a more modern value for 2020. So not just, there will be an example from Atlantic Canada, but there will also be examples from community water monitoring from other parts of Canada as well. So all other groups we work with, there's several different types, different reasons why groups create community water monitoring programs. One thing I often get asked is like, okay, why are groups doing what they do? And honestly, it really depends on the organization. It depends on what their kind of focus is. These are some common focuses of organizations that we work with. So a lot of groups are created because of their concern around degrading salmon habitat. So they look to restore that salmon habitat. Often cases that's from installing digger logs or doing more intensive habitat restoration programs throughout the summer and fall. A lot of organizations really try to engage with their local community through either salmon egg rearing programs like Fish Friends or fishing derbies, just getting people out on the land. And what's becoming more and more common are invasive species monitoring, of course, with the impacts of climate change. Being in Atlantic Canada, a lot of groups also look at or more and more at microplastics and marine debris. So that can be as simple or straightforward as organizing a beach or shoreline cleanup. There's a great organization down the south shore of Nova Scotia called Coastal Action, and they're doing really great projects around ghost gear. And then a lot of organizations do water quality monitoring because of impacts from either aquaculture or agriculture in their region. So Atlantic Water Network, we are a regionally focused organization. So we work with organizations in all 4 Atlantic provinces. And we have about 60 community partners. So we work with right now, about half of the organizations who are monitoring water quality. We try to provide networking opportunities. So for organizations to connect to each other. So like I mentioned earlier, when the network was first formed, it was recognized that each of these groups were kind of working within their own bubble. So we really try to connect these dots so that groups can learn from each other and not reinvent the wheel when a new program is started. We also provide various types of support to CBWM programs and organizations. That's either through standardizing equipment or standardizing the program itself, providing access to equipment, and then some various data management solutions like DataStream. And I also kind of touched upon briefly there, we are working with some national partners too. So Atlantic Water Network is really kind of the only regional organization related to community-based water monitoring. And there are really great provincial organizations and networks of environmental nonprofits and other networks, but really we're the only one within the region. So I've been really fortunate to be able to attend some conversations and meetings around some national partners or kind of initiatives. So in terms of calibration, typically in a non-COVID world, we provide in-person training, but of course we haven't been doing that this summer. But we do have some video refreshers that has really been used a lot since they were created. Calibrating is so essential, and one of the stories is any type of equipment that we use to measure, of course, has to be calibrated. It can be really one of those things that we don't think about and can really change the accuracy of our data quite easily. One example of just a simple type of calibration that can, or a piece of equipment that wasn't like, when it's not calibrated, can give you inaccurate values, can be as simple as your bathroom scale. A couple of years ago, my mom was kind of paying attention a bit more to her weight, and she was at my summer's cottage, and there was this bathroom scale. She didn't take it with her. It had been there over the winter, but of course she didn't realize that that was impacted. So she came out and she was all disgusted, being like, that scale, like there's no way over the last month that that value has changed that drastically. And sometimes it can be as simple as leaving it in an unwinterized cottage that can damage a piece of measuring equipment. So of course, that's a pretty basic example. When it comes to calibrating your water quality monitoring equipment, you want it to be as precise and accurate as possible. So we have these video refreshers to kind of go through those processes. We've created some record keeping kind of protocols for organizations to really just to kind of go over those basics of what information should be collected. For calibrating, it can be a really great way to kind of see if there's a potential drift in your values over time. You know, your biweekly calibrating values might seem fine one after another, but when you look at it over a few months, you might be able to see that trend and decline. It can also be a great indicator that maybe the probe should be replaced soon, even if it is within acceptable values. And of course, this all goes back to quality assurance and quality control protocols that we try to work with our partners on. We also do have a program called WhatPro Training. So this is an online training platform. There's a toolkit that I'll talk about in a second that kind of complements it. We just launched, we re-updated the website last year, but it's been running for several years now. There are 5 modules that kind of go over everything from what is a watershed to what are quality assurance and quality control protocols that should be implemented. So we really talk about everything that you need to know to create a basic water quality monitoring program. We created this program in collaboration with Environment Climate Change Canada and Nova Scotia Environment. So we were quite intentional that it was we had input from the government as well. And I think at this point we have probably closer to 1,000 registrants to date. So it's been taken by summer students, by board members, people who just want to know more about if they have a little bit of knowledge, they might go through it quicker, or if they are starting from scratch, it can be a great learning opportunity for organizations. And just to note too is that there are some new modules coming this winter. We're hoping to do one specifically about data management and one about brackish water monitoring, and then another theme in partnership with one of our partner organizations in New Brunswick, and that will be coming soon. So as I mentioned, we also have a toolkit. So it's basically the equipment you need to perform a baseline water quality monitoring program. So this again was developed in partnership with federal and provincial governments. It's essentially a YSI Pro Plus, which will help you sample dissolved oxygen, pH, conductivity, salinity, and a temperature, and a few other things. There's also GPS, a Secchi disc, and a few other kind of helpful tools for monitoring that can be helpful. Our longest running program is the equipment bank. So this is essentially a library of equipment that we loan out for free to groups for 2 to 3 weeks at a time. Like I said earlier, this was one of the first things that was created by the network. A lot of organizations, they want to be collecting data, but they just don't have the funding to invest in a $5,000 piece of equipment. So what we do is that we purchase these and maintain them, calibrate them, update them when the new parts are needed, and offer this free access to our community partners. We have a couple WhatPro kits, one with a 30-meter cable. Most of them have 10-meter cables, but that 30-meter is really helpful for groups interested in lake monitoring. And of course, we have lots of lakes in Atlantic Canada. But there are a couple other things like a flow probe. We have cabin kits and a few others. Last year, we launched new hubs in New Brunswick and PEI, and that was a direct ask from our community partners in those regions. Being based in Halifax, groups were finding it helpful if they were able to kind of make a weekend out of it kind of thing. But a lot of this equipment needs to be calibrated frequently. So it was very much a commitment to come to Halifax from Fredericton, for example, pick up the equipment, drive back, and then bring it back again in 2 weeks. So we partnered with ACAP St. John, located in St. John, New Brunswick, and the PEI Watershed Alliance, which their home base is in Charlottetown, but they work throughout the island of PEI to provide further access to equipment in these provinces. In terms of data management, we work with groups before they collect the data and then after what to do with that data. So data management, that's become more and more of a theme since we launched DataStream a few years ago in Atlantic Canada. And then also data analysis is something that we've been working pretty strongly on with our community partners. There's been this cycle for a lot of groups that we work with and for the need to collect data just for the sake of collecting data, but you need to do something with it too. And sometimes that can just be the hurdle of knowing where to start. So we had a data analysis workshop that we hosted last December. It was partly funded through the New Brunswick Environmental Trust Fund and a few other funders to support data analysis and kind of getting over that hurdle that can often be pretty limiting for some groups. And data management itself, that's been a theme that we've really tried to kind of work with our community partners more and more on. Data management is so essential from the get-go and really should be done from the beginning, from the guide to from when you're first creating a monitoring program. But oftentimes it's left to the end or thought about after the field season is over. And it's really important to think about throughout the entire way. So that's been something that we've been working on with our community partners. Some groups already do a fantastic job of data management. When we had our first workshop on data management like about a year and a half ago now, I was really worried. I was like, oh, this is going to be a dry subject, but we had some really fantastic conversations about it. So we were very pleased to see people get excited about data management. I'm a self-professed data nerd myself, so it was kind of fun to have those conversations with others. So DataStream, we had the kickoff for it in June 2018 after having a presentation by the Gordon Foundation about a year and a half earlier. They had just launched the Mackenzie DataStream, and when we had a meeting to kind of talk about what was next for data management in Atlantic Canada, we talked about Mackenzie DataStream, and there was just this huge excitement. And honestly, the very first question that was asked in that group of people was, can we have that here? So it was really fun to see a need and then be able to respond to it so easily. So Atlantic Water Network started working quite closely with the Gordon Foundation close to 3 years ago now. And we had or 4 years ago, really, almost 4 years ago. And we started really working very strongly about what would Atlantic DataStream look like. So we kicked it off in June 2018, and we've really grown a lot since then. Right now we have 44 groups of data online, so different environmental stewards. And not only do we have community partners, but we also have federal and provincial governments as well. So Environment and Climate Change data, Canada's data is online, as well as Nova Scotia Environment's lakes monitoring surveys. And in total, there's about 1.5 million data points, which is phenomenal. So what is DataStream? It's an open access platform for sharing water quality data. When the Gordon Foundation first set about creating DataStream, they were quite intentional that it would be for water quality data. There's often questions around other types of environmental monitoring data. Cabin is a really fantastic program, and they have a great database that's now open access as well. And there's other databases available, but there was a kind of a need for water quality data. DataStream is also an independent home for data, so it being managed and run by a foundation has really kind of given them that neutrality, that it's not a specific project-related database, it's really a program. I'll be doing a demo here in a bit, but it has a really user-friendly design that's great for public audiences as well as decision makers to access that information. There's some cool visualization tools that, again, I'll go over in a bit, but there's a kind of screenshot there. And then the other great thing that was really intentional by the Gordon Foundation was that there was a focus that there would be solid data policies and practices integrated throughout the platform itself. So to make sure that data is owned by the data users, it's not owned by the Gordon Foundation. there's really, they really did the research on different user agreements and on as well as like how the data is stored as well. So there's some really cool kind of behind the scenes work that's been done. So as I mentioned earlier, we aren't the only data stream out there. Mackenzie data stream was the first program launched, and that was with the founding partner of the government of the Northwest Territories. And that's another really great example of a community-based monitoring program need of, they were working quite closely with the government of the Northwest Territories, and they were implementing their community-led data collection program. And there was that need for somewhere to store their data. So that's really just how DataStream came about. And then about a year and a half or 2 years later, we launched Atlantic DataStream. And then about a year after that, so in March 2019, Lake Winnipeg DataStream was launched in partnership with the Lake Winnipeg Foundation. In each of these regions, it was really intentional that there was a local community partner. And that was really done so because the Grand Foundation is based in Toronto, and they saw this, they recognized this need, but they also recognized that there are people on the ground in each of these regions actually out there collecting data. So they were really quite intentional about tapping into these networks of other groups to just kind of knew the lay of the land a bit better. These are a few photos from the kickoff we held. It was both a celebration of DataStream, but then also we asked our community partners, okay, what's next? We had some really great feedback, and had there not been a pandemic this year, we were hoping to have kind of a 2-year follow-up almost of working with our partners to kind of ask, again, that question of like, okay, now what would you like to see next? Two of the suggestions that came out from the kickoff of DataStream in 2018 were those equipment banks in other provinces. So we're really happy to make that happen. And then also the use of data. So how can organizations, now that they have somewhere to put their data, how can they use it a bit better? DataStream really came about because we had this perfect storm of partnerships, basically. The water network already had this coordinated effort of working with organizations in all 4 provinces. And we've been working towards something like DataStream for some time in our region, but we just didn't have the capacity to do it on our own. So it was really only through partnership with the Grand Foundation. We also launched part of it in partnership with WWF Canada and the Hillsborough Rivers Association that we could make this happen in such a short time frame as well. In the past 2 years, we've really grown a lot, and we've listened to our community partners a lot. So it's been really great to reflect on that, and then also just to see where we can make changes to make things easier. That's something I always want to ensure, is that what we offer our community partners is making their workload easier, not adding to it. So I really find DataStream has been that missing piece of the puzzle for data management in Atlantic Canada. It's really been that kind of middle ground. Like I said before, Atlantic Water Network works with groups on the development of monitoring programs, the collection of data, and then with the analysis side of it. So DataStream really is that perfect middle piece of it to support the data management practices that can be so easily forgotten. DataStream really helps kind of create that atmosphere for others, or that kind of like planning from the get-go. If you know where you're going to be putting your data, it can be a lot easier to kind of to model your program around that than from trying to figure it out afterwards. So we now have this standardized regional data set for Atlantic Canada, and it's open access. So we have lots of examples of groups who, for example, are concerned about nitrogen and PEI, and can now go and search for other nitrogen data sets in the region to kind of see, maybe after a big storm, to see, okay, did other groups also have similar values that we did? With warming waters this year, I know there were a lot of organizations who were kind of concerned about fishing suitability, and it's a great way to share that information rather than calling somebody up and waiting for an email and that kind of thing. You can just go online and see it yourself. Data stream is also another great thing about it is that it's an opportunity to inform decision makers. So in 2017, WWF released their watershed reports, and most of Atlantic Canada came back as data deficient. So that means there wasn't enough data openly available for WWF to do the analysis for water quality in particular. And so what they're actually updating these reports, and their analysis will be released later this year in 2020, but they were able to do that because of platforms like DataStream now available in regions where there was data deficiency, and can now pinpoint a bit more about like what else needs to be done. I have a question mark beside government. Right now we're working on that question. Are government decision makers using DataStream, and how are they using it, and where does that information go? So that's another kind of question and something that we're working on. But essentially what DataStream has allowed us to do is to get outside our silos. In Atlantic Canada, I think with the exception, of course, of the St. John River, a lot of our watersheds are pretty self-contained. And it can be really easy for an organization to be focused in on one lake or one river within a watershed. DataStream really provides an opportunity, and I'll kind of show you on the map in a bit, to kind of look at other data points within that watershed, and to see who else is collecting data. Maybe there can be a new partnership there. If an organization is interested in expanding their program to reduce redundancies, possibly looking at DataStream and seeing what other program has already been collected, how recent is that information, and so on. So it's a really great opportunity for that as well. Like I said before, DataStream is always updating. There have been a couple cool features that have come about in the last 6 months even. The API is in its beta version. So API is essentially computers, servers talking to each other. So if you're, for example, if you're interested in running a model, rather than downloading the data from DataStream itself and then uploading it to your model analysis, your server can talk directly to DataStream server. So you can pull that information as soon as new data is added to data sets, then your analysis can be updated. So that's in the beta version right now. They just updated the new the upload template. So this was launched in I think it was like right when we launched the DataStream template itself, or the DataStream platform. So 2 years ago, and they've released 2.0 version of it. So one thing that we heard from our community partners was like, okay, this is great that all my information is on this template, but it's complicated. So they were able to kind of piece it out a little bit more, and have had some great responses to kind of simplifying that process. DataStream is now available in French, which is great for the groups we work with, especially in New Brunswick. So for French-speaking, or like groups where French is the working language, it's a great opportunity now. It's that, rather than translating everything to English. I think at this point I'll stop. I will do this demo on DataStream. But if you have any questions, I will keep an eye on the chat box, and I'd love to hear them. So just give me a second while I stop sharing and then reshare again. Okay, so this is Atlantic DataStream's website. You can go to it by atlanticdatastream.ca. Similarly, if you're interested in the data from Mackenzie or Lake Winnipeg, you can go to Lake Winnipeg datastream.ca or Mackenzie datastream.ca. This is where you want to watch that video that Greg was talking about at the beginning. There's some other great resources on here. There's a couple different ways to get to the data itself. So you can either explore data here or go explore data at the top of the screen. DataStream has a great blog with various resources and information, some information about that new upload template that I mentioned. I should say, I'm not sure if I said it yet, the original upload template and even the second version are modeled after the US EPA's WQX format. It's basically, so many of our watersheds are shared with the United States, and the US EPA did a great job on creating that standardized approach to data sharing. So it was a no-brainer in our sense to kind of model it after that. And then there's some other great kind of stories, community stories on that page, and yeah, some other great stats here. So that you can see the updated number of groups and also how much data and how many monitoring locations there are. So we're going to kind of explore the data now. And I'm sorry, my face isn't always right at the camera. So there being so much data, sometimes depending on your connection, it might take a second for it to load. So here we have the watersheds for Atlantic Canada. I'm going to zoom in. So each of these numbers represent how many locations, the monitoring locations there are within that bubble. So the more you zoom in, those numbers kind of spread out. So I'm going to go down on the South Shore of Nova Scotia. And so once you get in there, there are many, many more dots. There are a couple of great different features. You can add a map, the layer of watersheds, so to see the different watershed boundaries a bit more clearly. I think that's better when I zoom out. You can see those watershed boundaries. Oops. There we go. So those are the major watersheds, and then when you zoom in, you can see that again those a bit more clearly. You can also see the historical treaty locations. So for the peace and friendship treaties, which is most of Mi'kma'ki, for those of us located in Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. And then there's a couple different ways to get to the data itself. Like I said, all roads lead to Rome. So you can search data stream here if you know of a specific organization that you want to look at. So I'm going to look for ACOP St. John. And then those are the monitoring programs related to ACOP St. John that show up on the screen there. Or you can look, these are the different monitoring programs, and then this is the organization itself. So they have a couple of different options there. You can also, if you click on these lines here, you can filter out through a lot of these different categories. So if you want to see view all data sets, this might take a second, there are a lot. You can see the data sets that have been recently updated. So these are organizations who have recently added new data to their data set. Oh, that's great. The province of Prince Edward Island has just had their data uploaded, so that's great news. And then these kind of go back in time of recently updated data sets. You can also filter by organization. So if you want to see a specific organization's data set, you can scroll through here and see those. I'm just kind of curious in the Prince Edward Island data, so I might click on that. And here we go to the visualization. So again, this might take a second, probably a lot of data here. Oh, I see a question here. To please comment on the presence of or feasibility of school classes participating, environmental clubs, etc. So the Nova Scotia Young Naturalists Club have borrowed equipment from the equipment bank often as demonstrations. They often like to not only get the YSI, but also get the cabin kit. It's a great opportunity to get kind of, cabin, sorry, I'm not sure. I'm using an acronym there. It's the Canadian Aquatic Environmental Information it's a B, biota network, invertebrate biota network. So Cabin is a program, it's a nationally run program by Environment Canada to collect invertebrates, which are the little bugs that live in the water. And it's a great opportunity to kind of get kids out and engaged into seeing what kind of creatures are living on the rocks that you may not think are there otherwise. It's taking a little while, probably because it's a large data set. So I'm going to go back. And I'm going to find coastal action. So these are the different monitoring programs that Coastal Action has. Oh wait, let me finish that thought first. So another way to engage with youth, the Wet Pro training is written at a grade 8 reading level. So it is kind of geared towards high school students. I've had several university students take it as part of their limnology or kind of environmental monitoring classes. And so there's a couple different ways to kind of get involved. A lot of organizations also, like I said earlier, host fishing derbies. A great opportunity to kind of get out on the water and collect fish by fishing and kind of create a bond with their local environment. Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to get involved. So we've worked closely with the Nova Scotia Youth Young Naturalist Club, but there's lots of other great initiatives for youth too. So I'm going to pull up the LaHave River data set. There we go. So this is the visualization tool that I was talking about earlier. Each of these points would represent a different unique observation. And when you scroll your mouse over it, you can see the month and year, the location itself, and what's being monitored. So on August 2007, this is a temperature water point of 16.92, and that's what was collected in the field. You can change the chart type if you prefer a different style. You can see what other values were collected at these locations they're available within this data set. So all of these different parameters are available. Coastal Action does a lot of lab samples as well, so grab samples that they send off to the lab. So they have a lot more data available than would be typically available with the YSI. And you can chart those. So it's a great opportunity to direct community members to go see that data itself. You can also if you're only interested in one location, you can clear that selection and then maybe pull up. So this is just the pH for Bridgewater to kind of look at that on its own. For pH, for example, you can see some of these values have guidelines in brackets behind them. pH is one of those that has guidelines, and that's a CCME freshwater guidelines for aquatic health. The CCME is a Canadian Council for Ministers of Environment, and they're just kind of one example for different guidelines that are out there for values that groups can kind of compare their organizations with. Another way to kind of get at that data itself is just by clicking on the dots in that region. So if you know visually, if you're interested in to see within that watershed what else is available, where are we now? You can just also click on that dot. It will load, it'll tell you the program, and then which data set that's available in. So you can again click on that, they'll bring up a new tab in that case, and it will pull up that data set again. Oh, this is part of CARP though. This is a different user, but that's okay. It's a good example to kind of show you what else is available out there. If you're interested in the data set, I'm just gonna go back. If you're interested in downloading the data set, you then click this download button, which would then pull up the kind of this information about the license and disclaimer and terms of use. One thing, oh, sorry, I didn't mention this before, is that blockchain has been incorporated into DataStream. So that was through the partnership with WWF Canada and funded through the RBC Tech for Nature. And essentially how blockchain is used in this example is that it will tell you when it was last been updated, so when it's been verified, and keeping kind of just so when you see the different transactions within that data set. So it's a very simple way of it being used, but it can kind of give you kind of that transparency of when the data has last been modified and by whom. So whether it's adding data to the data set, whether a mistake was caught, and there was a pH of 22 by accident, there was a kind of typo in that case, that can all be fixed. And then you can see that through the chain of information. You have to agree to the data set's terms of use. So when you upload data, you can choose the licensing agreements. Most people use the similar license of it just be their attribution licensing. But there are other options. Basically what that means is that if you are to use that data, you have to say where the data was, or who collected the data. The other option is that there is no kind of need to say who collected that data. But of course, we recommend that data is that you attribute it to the collector of that information. So you can't download the data until you hit agree. So you have to agree to that before you do it. And then you can also say the intended use for it to be downloaded. So whether you are government, industry, indigenous peoples, for an educational reason, not-for-profit or other. And then that's available to the data users. And so the steward who owns that data, they can see kind of those brief categories of who's using that information. Yeah, so I think we just came up at 1:45. I did have what I like to call a datathon for people if you're interested, just to kind of get you using DataStream, but it's not I also would love to open it up to questions if that's more of interest to folks. I know we have a timeline here.
Hey, I see Elaine has put something here about community groups in the chat section.
Awesome.
Can you give examples of partnerships that have helped local organizations with analysis?
It's a great question. Analysis is such a tricky part of it. So oftentimes groups will work with the universities. So Acadia is a great example. There have been great partnerships between the Clean Annapolis River Project and Acadia and Environment Canada on like analysis side of things. Environment Canada has really supported a lot of groups when it comes to analysis. So both CARP and Clean Annapolis River Project and Coastal Action have yearly report cards that they present, and those are created in partnership with Environment Canada to really kind of do the evaluation of what which sites have kind of great values for data for kind of water quality, which are ones that more people should be concerned about, and that kind of thing. So those are some great examples for analysis. I'd also just like to say too is that we have online, we have a lot of great resources for data analysis on our website. So it's atlwaternetwork.ca under our resources page, and those can also help groups when it comes to analysis.
Maybe just a question, Emma, you've got now 15 land use planners on here from government, private sector, probably some provincial, some municipal. Is there anything we can do to help you? Like we write policy, we prepare applications, we do development projects, we have fingers in all sorts of parts of planning, and especially development of our community. So as professional planners, in this case, Nova Scotia and Atlantic, is there things we can be doing to help you, to guide you, or to kind of further the cause?
That's a great question, Greg. I think honestly it's being engaged with the groups that are out there. there are really awesome organizations doing great work with shoestring kind of budgets. And for example, CARP has one of the longest running monitoring programs in Atlantic Canada, really. They have data dating back to 1992, and they have through their River Guardians program. And if there are ways to support some of those water quality monitoring programs, whether it's through scientific advising or kind of sharing that information within like for policy to help inform policy, I think that's honestly that's like our end goal. One thing I'm not sure if I showed it on the main data stream page is that they have a cycle, what they call a data to policy cycle. And in a perfect world, our community partners would be collecting data, and then that data would be going to data stream. Land use planners and other policy creators would be using that information that's being collected by community groups, which to inform policy, and then that would then impact those community groups again. Right. So kind of bridging that gap, I guess, of like knowing that there's this slew of data available throughout our region to kind of explore a little bit and see what's there. And then if there isn't data that that would be helpful, knowing that would be really great too. So like what data should groups would be helpful to help inform those decisions.
I think we have municipal and provincial planners online here. Maybe somebody wants to jump in, but we hear quite often that it's not a municipal issue. It's not a municipal issue. Water, environment, it's provincial land. Mm-hmm. We can't do anything as a municipality where we want to write policy. We want to bring in new standards. We want to manage and monitor things, but it seems to be always someone else's problem or else's concern. So mm-hmm. I don't know if anybody at either municipal or provincial wants to jump on that, but it seems to be some cooperation, I guess, of levels of government if we really want to improve the overall situation of our watersheds and watercourses.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something we've been kind of coming up against for a long time too, is that there's definitely a kind of balancing act of knowing who to ask and who to talk to and like where to direct these questions. Right. Yeah, and so it's definitely something that kind of we've been dealing with some of these national kind of conversations we've been part of those have been really directed towards the federal government. But of course, that's come back to is like some of these questions are provincial or kind of municipal related too. There are great examples of organizations working with their municipalities. And I was just had a thought that's escaped me, but if it comes back, I will say it.
Just one quick comment there from Daniel, and if anybody else wants to jump on with a question, either get it in the comment booth or section there, or feel free to unmic and ask a question. Daniel's going on about flow data and water level data would be fantastic to start collecting and including. It sounds like you know, Daniel.
Yeah, I think we've had that conversation before. So I will say, just for those who maybe haven't had this conversation with me before, for flow data, the Lake Winnipeg Foundation has done really great work kind of incorporating flow data into their analysis. So the Lake Winnipeg Foundation is really concerned about phosphorus hotspots and identifying those hotspots within the Lake Winnipeg basin. And so they input their data that they collect in partnership with their community partners, but they also utilize the flow data from the National Hydrological Center. So there are other databases for flow, but we do encourage groups to collect it themselves as well if they aren't near those kind of monitoring locations. Another question there, or kind of statement from Elaine.
Standardization with respect to data collection resulting from this project will help improve credibility of input of local groups to decision makers. So
thanks, Elaine.
Tough when you have such a wide pool of probably volunteers most of the time, and looking for standardization is probably a bit tricky for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it's one of those things that like you can't, like you always have to talk about it. It's really easy, I think, especially with volunteer turnover, staff turnover. A lot of groups we work with may not have full-time staff throughout the year, so they might only rely on summer students to be collecting their water quality data. And that's part of the reason why we created the Wet Pro training, was that so there was a standardized training even for all of these different groups to have for their staff. So they're collecting data in the same way, because it's so true. Standardization is really essential from the get-go.
Okay, anybody else want to throw something at Emma, or can you leave us with a slide with your website, or how do we find you if we have questions?
I will pull that up. I did have that. Well, here we go.
If not, then you can just tell us what it is and we can go find
Yeah.
it. Oh,
There we go. So you can find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at ATL Water Network on all 3 different platforms. And that's also our website. So it's www.atlwaternetwork.ca. And I'm also happy to, if there's any questions or comments people have after this, please shoot me an email. It's just emma.wattie@smu.ca. I am working from home, so you can give our office and phone number or a call. I try to check that regularly, but email is the best way to get in touch.
Okay, well, I'm at 1:53. I'm going to jump off. Thanks, Emma. Appreciate it. It's new information for me, and hopefully some of these other people have gained some insight into the great work. Keep it up. We need you guys pushing forward with this. It's excellent stuff. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much.